Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you again for joining the webinar this morning on Twinmotion. And this is specifically on bringing your scene to life with Twinmotion. So let me go through a couple slides here just to introduce what we're doing today. So this is a little introduction to me. Again, my name is Dean Yao. I'm an application specialist out of the San Francisco Bay Area. Been in the industry for over 30 years, in and out of the computer industry, working for companies such as Intergraph and Autodesk, Revit, and so on. So some of my specialties are Revit architecture, AutoCAD, Twinmotion, and BIM 360. And this little mugshot of me. And just to kind of recap about Twinmotion, what is Twinmotion? So it's a visualization platform for AC professionals. So I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts about Twinmotion because this is more specifically about bringing your scene to life, but just kind of recapping what Twinmotion is all about. So, and today's presentation is bring your scene to life with Twinmotion. So I'll do a presentation on all of these topics here. Try to keep myself in order of what we're going to, what I'll present here with Parametric Doors, vegetation, importing and swapping out content, weather, reactive materials, some other things like Haze, seasons, and see if we can do some character animations, and so forth. So with that, let's get into it. So let me open up Revit real quick. Again, this is just a quick recap on, this is the model that I'll be using, the data set that I'll be using, and this is just the standard out-of-the-box Revit data set. And in order for us to get this into Twinmotion, there is the plugin, of course, up at the top, the Twinmotion plugin, where we can export this model to an FBX file so that I can bring it into Twinmotion. Additionally, you could also export this file directly out of Revit into an FBX format, but it's preferred that you use the Twinmotion plugin and use the tools here that are provided for you in order to export this more efficiently into the Twinmotion application. So with that, let me get into Twinmotion, and then let's get right into that data file. So I'm into the default Twinmotion session here, so I can just kind of tumble around, and this is the default kind of ground and background that is provided with the software when you first deploy it. So what I want to do is I want to bring in that scene from Revit. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and import that. Let me go ahead and import that file. So let me go find that on my desktop. This is my bring scene to life. So let me open this. And again, there are a variety of options when you're bringing in the file. And the way that I want to bring my file in is I want to keep the hierarchy. So there are the other options here where you can collapse the model by material, so it recognizes the materials that were applied from the Revit model. I can collapse all, which essentially just kind of bundles it up into like one big massive block. And that's what I don't want to do that because I want to manipulate certain things within the model. So I want to keep my hierarchy because it segregates the model out, basically kind of keeps all the components as they were in objects from Revit. This is a fixed UV. This is kind of adjust the materials that were in Revit and kind of maps them as closely as possible inside of Twinmotion. And then I just want my Z-axis up. So I'm just going to go ahead and import that. So the easiest way for me to navigate in here is just use my scene graph, and I'm just going to go ahead and find that model. So it's easy for me to just click on the model, hit my F key, and it brings me right to the model. So this is my scene. So before I start working on the exterior of the model, the first thing I wanted to get into was showing you guys how there is a new feature inside of Twinmotion, which is the Parametric Doors. So what I want to do here is I want to grab this pseudo door that didn't come over real great from Revit, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and select that door, and it tells me it's an entrance door, but I'm going to grab both of these because there's two of them on either side of this walkway here. So the first thing I want to do is, grab that door, and I want to replace that. So I'm going to replace that object, and come to my library and go to my objects and go to doors. So we have a new feature here in 2020.2 of Twinmotion with the parametric doors. So we have two types. We have rotating doors and sliding doors. So I'm just going to open up my rotating doors, and there's a slew of different door types in here that you can select from. So you can kind of click on them, kind of get a sense of what they look like by just rolling over them. I'm going to grab this simple rotating O2 door, just drop it into my replacement area, and then go ahead and replace that. So you can see that puts the door in here, kind of skewed a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is click on it and rotate this. So I want to rotate this maybe 180 degrees. Oop, rotate this. Oh, goodness, come on. Rotate. Oh, let's try that again. There we go. Now that I have the door kind of rotated in the correct position, I'm going to click on this little ball here, and it's kind of fit it to that frame there. So that's a nice little feature. I have tools in here where I can adjust its height and width, but I just clicked on the ball here so I can just kind of fit it into that frame here. So now that I have my door in place, there's a variety of things that I can kind of control down here in my menu. So the first one is style. So going back to more, I can change on the door hardware. I can select what I want. Maybe I want it to be this one. Say okay. I can turn on my hinges. I can turn them on and off. You can see that if I turn them on and off, you can see the hinges turning on and off. And there's also some casing styles here. So if you look at the, oops, let me go back, go to the casing styles. There's a variety of different ones. I'm just going to stay with the standard one. Let me go back to that style again. So again, style, it's bringing me back to kind of the library. So even though I pick style 2, I can come in here and maybe if I didn't like that first selection, I can select something else here. The next little button here is the trigger. So I can trigger this. So I can either have it open, I can have it closed, or I can have it triggered. So my trigger is based on a couple things here. So I can have the door swing open based on my camera view, my character path, or a custom path. So as I'm approaching this door, the door will open for me. So those are the triggers. And if you can see here, you see this little blue circle radius around the door. That's the trigger mechanism. So I can change the width or the diameter of that trigger. So I can make it very small. So I have to be more or less right on top of that door before the door triggers are opened. Or I can make it a little bit bigger so that maybe as I'm approaching the door, I don't run into it. So, I'm going to keep my radius at like 2 meters there. And then you can have a delay for when it opens, as you're approaching it, it delays and then it opens. Back to the other things here. So again, maybe I want to change this to a left-handed opening. I can see that I want the door to open inside. So I'm going to change that position to outward, even though it is kind of inward. And so as I approach this door now, as I walk towards the door will open for me. So very nice feature now, where before, if I was using my camera to walk through around the building, I wouldn't be able to go through this door. I would kind of hit the door and it would stop myself. But now I can start walking through this door and it opens for me. And again, I have another one on the other side here, where again I can take this and rotate this one as well. Oop. And I'll put this one in place. So and fit that. Oop. Fit that there. And again, it's the same. I have the same controls here as I approach the door. It'll open for me. So that's the concept of the parametric doors. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on here, but that's part of bringing your scene to life now. Where now we have these doors that are automatically open for you as you approach them. So very nice new feature in version 2020.2. Okay, so let's work on the outside a little bit. So by default, I have my ground here and I have my background scene. So let's clean this up a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to turn off my starting ground. So go to my scene graph and just turn that off for now. And what I want to do is I want to put in a new landscape here. So I'm going to select this rocky grass. So I'm just going to drag that into my scene here and let that update here for a second. And it'll put in that rocky grass scene for me. And now that looks a little bit better because I want to have this house in kind of a rural location. And the next thing I want to do is I want to kind of clean up this grass here. It didn't come over very well from Revit, so I'm going to swap that out as well. So I'm going to go to my material picker. I'm going to click on that grass and say, well, I want it to be something a little nicer that matches up with what I have out there. And that looks and feels a little bit better now. Additionally, again, by default, I have this kind of city scene in the background here. You can see these buildings, and I certainly don't want that. So I'm going to clean that up as well. So if I go back to my location, I'm going to change that background to something that's a little more conducive to my setting here. And maybe I go with the countryside. So now you can see those buildings disappear. And now I have a scene that's a little bit more in line with what I want here with my rocky ground and my countryside. Okay, so now that I have that in, you can see that I have this kind of pre-built surface in here that's not really meshing well with my existing ground here. So what I want to do is I want to kind of bring those two together and kind of mesh them together. So what I can do is I can sculpt that terrain a little bit to kind of bring it back together a little nicer. So I'm going to select that ground. And once I select that ground, I get some new tools down here. I got sculpt terrain and I can paint terrain. So the first thing I want to do is sculpt the terrain. So I want to sculpt this to kind of, blend these two things together. So I can change this. If you can kind of see here, I have this diameter that is my my tool for blending here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start blending in this surface here. And yeah, I'm just randomly kind of rolling my mouse over here and just kind of, blending these two surfaces together. So I can kind of do that. I can make this diameter a little bit bigger if I want to be a little bit more aggressive with this. And just kind of make these things grow a little bit deeper. Swing around here to this other side, kind of blend these things together. Something like that, just to kind of bring these two surfaces together. And I have other tools in here. Maybe I want to dig. So maybe I want to bring this down a little bit. Maybe bring that up. Then I have some smoothing tools in here as well. So I can add noise. I can smooth this out a little bit. Maybe bring this down. Yeah, maybe put some indentations in here so you can see I can add some valleys and such inside the terrain here. So, now I kind of have something that's a little tighter. Now I've meshed those two surfaces together. What I can also do is kind of paint some terrain in here as well. So I'm going to paint some terrain. So perhaps I can select maybe this grassy ground. I'm going to select this grassy ground. I'm going to hit my little paintbrush here. And again, I have this tool where I can change the size of what I'm painting here. But I'm just going to kind of paint inside of here, kind of randomly, kind of make this a little bit more interesting. So you can see that as I paint in here, you can kind of see what's happening here. And just kind of painting this grassy ground in here, just to kind of break up the surface a little bit so it's not just all grass. So you kind of get the idea there where I can make this a little bit more interesting. So now I've kind of cleaned up my site. I've kind of meshed those two things together. So let me show you a couple other kind of fun tools inside of Twinmotion. I can also come in here and do some what's called Vegetation Scatter. So again, this is on my context menu and under Vegetation Scatter. So Vegetation Scatter basically looks at any solid shape that's inside of your object. So I can grab a couple of these items here. Maybe I grab this and these violets, and I click on both of these because I want to scatter both of these inside a shape here. So I'm just going to paint this little shape here rather than having it a concrete pad. Maybe I want it to be a little garden area. So you can see I just quickly grabbed that shape and it just scattered that vegetation, quite randomly. You can see I got a little bit of bleed here, but I can clean that up. I can use my little eraser tool here, and let me change my diameter of my eraser. It's a little bit big, and I can kind of come in here and start cleaning this up a little bit so it's not so messy. It's not, encroaching on areas that I didn't want it to be. You kind of get the idea. I also have some inside my house here, which probably wouldn't work either. Oop. Clean that up as well. So something like that. So a vegetation scatter is a real quick way of, adding that vegetation very, very quickly to a shape out there. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can kind of see it. They're pretty nice little features here. These little violets with the faces on them, and they're kind of wafting in the wind a little bit, so they have a little life to them. So I'll show you that a little bit later with some of the trees, and we can turn up that wind gust a little bit more and show you how that affects that. So now that I have that done, let's zoom out a little bit further and add a little bit more texture to the site here. So let me paint some landscape here, maybe some trees. Let me go back to my context menu, and this time I'm going to paint some vegetation as opposed to the scatter. So my paint, I'm going to paint some trees here. So I'm going to add to my painting library a variety of trees here. I'm just going to drag and drop these into this area down here. Just whatever trees I feel are kind of interesting, you know, maybe one more. So I have my trees in my selection here. I'm going to select all these, okay, and then I want to paint. And let me change my diameter a little bit bigger so I can start just kind of painting out my trees out here now. So I add a little bit more interest to my site. Just kind of randomly paint this stuff out here. Let's see here, maybe put a little bit more back here. You can see now how quickly I can start adding vegetation to this site very, very fast by just painting with these with that tool inside of here. Okay, so that's pretty fast. So I added some more life to this environment here. I've got a little bit of a forest setting around my house. So some of the other things I can do in here is if I select that painted selection of trees in my settings, I have this concept of aging the trees. So, again, for maybe a landscape architect, maybe they want to see what this is going to look like after so many years, right? You can start growing these trees and kind of getting an idea of what that's going to look like over time. And this is just, having the growth on. By having the seasons on, so what happens is these trees will change based on the season. From summer here to fall, it'll show the colors of the trees. And then wintertime, it'll show the leaves off. And then here's that wind concept too. So as I zoom in a little bit closer to some of these leaves here, you kind of see them. They're just kind of, gently kind of wafting in the wind there. So they do kind of have this physics about them, so that as I change up, I'll show you how I can change the wind setting a little bit, and then the leaves start, moving about a little bit further. So that's very, very quick how I can get some trees in here. So what I also have in here is when I brought the model in from Revit, I had some of these RPC trees, and I want to swap those out as well. So hang on one second, let me just clean up my screen over here. Yeah, some of these RPC trees, they're just like little cardboard cutouts. They're not very interesting. They don't have any life to them. They're just flat. So that's okay. They came over from Revit, but I can change those out. So I'm going to select this tree, and I'm going to change all these honey locusts by selecting all of them, right-clicking again, and I'm going to replace them. So I'm going to replace these with maybe this birch. Say okay, so replace them. So now it puts those birch trees in here. Let me just zoom around a little bit. So let me just grab one of these, kind of move it out of the way a little bit so they're not kind of sitting on top of one another. So I got these birch trees over here. And actually changed one over here as well. I got another one of these cardboard trees that I want to swap out. So this is a Lombardy poplar, so I want to swap that one as well. So I'm going to replace that one. Maybe I make this Norway spruce. So replace it. There's that tree. So let me kind of just move it over here a little bit. And then finally, I got one more little tree back here, this little red ash. And again, same thing. Right click over it, replace object. Maybe, I don't know, sassafras. That sounds interesting. And replace that tree there. Again, I can grab that. Nope, let me zoom in a little bit here. They're not, trying to grab that one tree over here so it's not sitting on top of one another. I just kind of move that one over here. Move my sassafras tree over here. So now I have trees that I painted via Twinmotion, but I also took those cardboard cutout trees and kind of made it a little bit more interesting now and kind of replaced those with some Twinmotion trees. which will have now that physics applied to them. We'll have the leaves on them, they'll move, and they'll change with the seasons and such. Additionally, so again, with the theme of adding life to this scene, again, I have these RCP people in here that are, extremely uninteresting because they're just little cutouts. So I'm going to swap those out as well. And it's the same process that I did with the tree. So I'm going to grab this little character here, and this happens to be Yin Yin. I'm going to grab all 3 instances of her, and I'm going to change her, replace object again. This time I go to my library and go to characters and go to my animated characters, and let me select maybe Emily, see here, maybe Agnes and Alice. So I'll grab those three characters and replace with those RCP people with them. So now I got, some people that are a little more interesting now they're animated. So maybe I want to grab this character, move her over, and they have a variety of things associated with them. They're animated characters, right? So they have a variety of positions, whether they're idle, they could be, lying down, which is kind of silly. They could be dancing. If they're idle, there's a variety of things associated with idle. Maybe she's on the phone. She's talking on the phone. Okay, so again, I have a couple other instances of people, of these ladies out here. I have another character up here. She's up here on the phone as well. And then I had one more, I think, in the background. Back over here. Got that character. And let me just go to her. And looks like she's putting on some makeup, but let's make her a little more interesting and have her phoning as well. Because it's one of those things where we're in the, maybe I'll have her drinking something so she's not moving around too much. Very easy for me to swap out these cardboard people. Again, one more. We got Alex in here, and I'll do this one last thing. We'll place him out as well. I'll maybe make him Chris. So we'll swap him out. So now we got Chris out there. And Chris looks pretty lonely, so let's add some people up there to make him a little less lonely. So if I go back to my characters, and I go to my characters, I'm going to add some groups here. So I'm going to grab a group of 3 people, kind of drag them out here, and place them in here. Then I'll grab another group of 3. Oop, I don't want you over there, I want you over here. And you notice that as I grab groups of people, it's a random selection. Even though it's a group of 3, it's a different set of people that get posted into my Twinmotion scene. So that's another nice feature. It adds a little bit more realism to them here. I got, a couple groups of 3 people, but they're different. So every time I grab another group of 3, it'll be another random sampling of those people. So that adds a little bit more interest up here so that Chris isn't all alone. He's got some people up there that are just chatting up top on the rooftop. Real quickly, I don't like this wood. It's bothering me, so I'm going to swap that out as well real quick. Just put some siding on here just to make it a little bit more interesting. Something like that. So it stops bothering me. So now we have the little bit of life. We got the trees. We got the people in here. So the next thing I want to show you is that we can import objects from other resources. So I have a website open here called XFrog. And XFrog is a great site where you can grab some content, some trees, some foliage here. So I happen to grab one tree from that site, and I can show you how to import that. So let me go back to my import, and let's go import that tree. Let me go find that. That's under my XFrog. It's a Japanese walnut, so I'm going to grab this kind of medium-sized one. And under my options, I want to collapse this whole thing because then it will behave. This is that concept where now I just want it to behave as one object, not a bunch of stuff. And again, apply that, say okay, and import the data. And now let me turn off my model so we can find that thing. Let me just turn off my model. And let me go and find my tree. There it is. And one thing I want to do is I want to, I want to change its scale because it's looking a little bit small. So I'm going to grab this, sorry, you guys all busy. I'm going to grab this tree and just kind of make it bigger. I don't know, something like that so we can see it. Still pretty small, huh? Something like that. So I got a tree here, and oop, good grief. Let me get out of scale and go back to move. Just kind of move this out of the way so I can kind of see what's happening with it. Okay. And then let me just go ahead and turn on my model again. See where that is in context. So now I have a tree in here. It's quite large, but it's okay. So you get the idea that I can bring in content from other sources and kind of place them into my model. And even better yet, once I have the tree kind of the way I want, I can add this to my user library. So the way that I do that is, again, I'm going to come to my scene graph, and I'm going to right-click on this tree, this Japanese maple, and say, add to my user library. Okay. So if I go back to my library, and I go back to my user library, I have my Japanese tree here. So I can delete this tree now. Oops. Delete this. And then from my user library, I have this tree that I can drag in here now. Right? I have another instance that's a little bit smaller. So that's the way. That's an easy way for you to kind of grab content. Now you can add it to your user library, kind of have these available to you from project to project. So very neat tool there. So that's how we can import objects from other resources. So let me go into the patio. Go back to this patio real quick here and talk about a little bit about material and reactive materials. So what that means is if I click on this material here, there's all these settings for this particular material, the color, flexion, scale, and over here is this concept of weather. So weather for this material comes into play if I change the weather. So let me go and do that very quickly. Let me change the weather from a nice, bright, sunny day to a rainy day. So I'm just going to move my slider to a rainy day. And now, as you see, if I go a little closer, you can see now that the material is behaving as if puddles and the droplets of the rain are reacting off of that material, right? So if I click that material again and I turn weather off, you can see that now it doesn't show that reactive or that physics of the raindrops dropping on that surface. So I can turn that physics on, and now you can see those raindrops being dropped onto my scene here. So let me go back again. Oops, go here. I'm going to turn my weather back to a bright sunny day again. And then I can show you another interesting feature here is that if I go back to my library and I go to my objects and I go to decals, I'm going to grab a decal. And let me grab this puddle and drag this puddle on here. So I got a puddle that's kind of on top of my kind of brick surface here. And again, I go back to my weather and I turn it back up to a rainy day again. You can see that even that puddle now is reacting to that weather as well. You can see the raindrops are kind of reacting to the water falling onto it. So another neat kind of feature there. So you have the ability to add those decals that are reactive to weather, and then of course the material itself. And you can see as I zoom out a little bit here that, oops, zoom out a little bit, you can see that the grass is also a reactive material that has weather on as well. Let me go back, turn that weather back down again. We'll come back and visit weather again in just a little bit. So let me see where I'm at on my agenda. I'm running a little bit long, I think, but let me try to get through a couple other things here. So in that theme with weather, so let me zoom out a little bit. So some of the things that you can do with the weather here is, as I just showed you, I can change the scenes here from a sunny day to a kind of a rainy day. Additionally, I can change the season too. So as I slide this over and I go into fall, you can see now the trees are starting to change color. I can go to a wintry day. I can make it a wintry snowy day. I can change things in here where maybe I want the wind speed to go up. I can change the direction of the wind. And as I bring the smog up, you can now see that as I bring the smog up, that wintry day kind of turns more into a blizzardy day because I got this smog and it's really, really snowing now. So we have a lot of those controls here where we can, simulate a variety of things in here. So additionally, let me go back to some of the other settings. I can change the time of day. Maybe it's later in the evening. I can change, this is just really a time stamp of the day and time. I can change my north offsetting, so where the sun is. So I kind of move that sun out back here. So you can adjust where that north offsetting is. So a lot of fun tools in here, and you can actually put yourself in a specific geographical location, wherever it is, type in that city, it will find it, and you can put yourself into that geographical position. So let me go back. I'm going to go back to weather. I'm going to make everything back to a nice sunny day, and I do have one last thing I'd like to show. So let me turn the smog off. And what was the other thing? I think, time of day. Let's go back to kind of like afternoon setting. One last thing I wanted to show you guys was how we can kind of add some water features here. So let me go back to my scene graph. I'm going to turn on my ground, and let me click on that ground. I'm going to move this ground down a little bit, just to kind of give me a little bit of a little lake here. Let's see, maybe down a little bit more. Something like that. Okay, so I'm gonna simulate this little plot here as a little lake here. So I'm gonna select this, and I'm gonna change that material to water. So let me do lake 2. So let me zoom in on it. So now I got a little bit of a lake feature here. So there are some fun tools inside of the water that I can fuss with. So some of the first things I can do is, the water depth isn't really applicable here because I'm just kind of on top of the surface. So I got this ground, so it is kind of where it's at. I can increase the waves, make the waves a little bit deeper. There's other things in here like turbidity, like this is more like the translucency of the water. You can make it a little less, or make it more opaque or whatever. And then caustics like the algae kind of things. You can change the caustic intensity of the water so you can make it kind of a little dirty or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of fun features inside of there. Let me go in here, make my wave size a little bit bigger. I want to maybe you can change your flow direction, maybe turn up my flow speed so you can kind of see the water rippling on here. So now I got that kind of set up. Similar to what I did with the terrain here, I can select this and paint terrain, and maybe I want this rocky, mossy stuff here. So I'm going to just kind of paint a little bit of that in here, and then maybe just again sculpt a little bit in here, not a whole lot, just to kind of get you the idea of what's happening. Kind of put a couple mounds over here just to make it a little bit more interesting. Maybe smooth this edge out a little bit over here and over here. And now that I kind of have that in here, let's add a little bit more context to this. So let me go back to my menu, go back to my library, go to objects, and select the boat. And grab this boat and just kind of put this boat in here, maybe like that. Rotate it around a little bit. Move it into the, good grief, come on. And kind of rotate it around a little bit. So now you can see that I have my boat here. It's kind of reacting to that water a little bit, just kind of rocking a little bit in that water. It's kind of interesting. There's some other things that I can do in here. Maybe if I can get, this is always a little bit challenge, but let me go back to characters and get some animals and try to put in some of maybe these seagulls. It's always a bit of a challenge of trying to get these guys in here the right way. So that's kind of cool. Maybe move it up a little bit. Let me undo that because that didn't look right. Yeah, we'll leave the seagulls right there. So seagulls are just kind of flying around here. Maybe they had lunch and they have a picnic basket with food, so they're just hovering around, but you get the idea. And then actually to add a little bit more interest in here, let me do one quick thing here. Let me go back to my paths. I'm going to add, oops. I'm going to add a path. I'm going to add a custom path. I'm just going to kind of paint something in here very, very quickly. Something like that. I don't know. Okay. And I'm going to change this from a box. I don't want a box flowing on the water. Go to, sorry. To library, go back to vehicles. I'm going to pick a different boat, maybe this little inflatable boat too. And now you can see that boat kind of going on there. Let's change its speed a little bit faster. Something like that. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, if I kind of put myself down by the water here and I got this little boat, I have this boat animating across the scene here. I got my birds flying in front of me, diving into the rocks. So you can see this little animation here. And then finally, if something I like, maybe I want to do a real fast animation. Back to here, I'm going to create a video. So my first keyframe here. Second keyframe. Zoom into here. Something like that. Say third keyframe, and now I got a quick video. So I can kind of run this and kind of play with that a little bit. So I think I ran a little bit long, but I just wanted to give you guys a sense of how you can, actually bring a little bit of life to your scene by adding vegetation. Again, you kind of see this boat wafting in the water, adding a water scene. There's a lot going on in this particular model here, but you guys, just to give you guys an idea how you can kind of make those scenes a little bit more interesting rather than having kind of a static, building. We got a lot of stuff going on. We got people who are animated. We got trees. I've got a water scene out there with a boat flying around the water. So a lot happening here. So hopefully that was helpful for you this morning. I will end my presentation and turn it over to Quintana if we have any questions.
Yes, we do. We have a couple. Can Twinmotion integrate RCP objects, especially plantings?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the trees I had in here, I swapped it out. You can actually import those, no problem.
Let's see. Give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
Is everything you do in Twinmotion integrative? For example, if I update objects and materials in Twinmotion, then realize I need to update the model in Revit and re-import, do you lose all of the work I did in Twinmotion?
Yes and no. So Twinmotion is one directional. So there is a tool inside of, not a tool, but there is a mechanism called See in Twinmotion. So if you're working in kind of vetting out your model, See in Twinmotion is a great way because you can kind of work with the model, test your materials out. Maybe you need to make a model adjustment in Revit. You can make that model adjustment back in Revit and then re-export or go back to See in Twinmotion, and those changes will take place. But the flip side of that is if I am actually applying materials to my model in Twinmotion, it doesn't work. It's not bidirectional. I can't bring that back into Revit. But there are some workflows that we can kind of help you to give you a little tutorial on how you can kind of get around that a little bit.
What is the typical file size?
It really depends upon it's dependent upon the content that you have in your model. They can get quite large, obviously, with the more, obviously if I'm putting a lot of trees and a lot of context here, this particular file on its own is relatively small, the landscape file itself. The FBX that I'm working with is only 6 megs. If I save this out, I can save this just to kind of give you a sense of what that would be. Just put that into my presentation. I'll put it in here. I'll test. save that out, and I can tell you very quick. So the model grew from 6 megs to 185 megs. So yeah, it really is going to be dictated upon the volume of content that's put in there.
Can you add materials like siding with more color selections and exposure widths?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Can you add more materials like siding with more color selections and exposure width?
Absolutely. So in addition to all these other third-party sites, you can manipulate the materials here. So let me get out of this for a second. Oh, let me get out of media mode. So you have tools here to manipulate the actual materials that are inside of Twinmotion, but you can copy these, or what's called make a duplicate, and start to customize each one of these. In addition, there are other websites, one of them which is, if you subscribe to Twinmotion, it's called Quixel. You can get a lot of free content, and there's a ton of materials and colors and textures that you can download and integrate them right into Twinmotion. So a lot of flexibility.
And then there was a question about adding doors. Is that an option as well? New doors, new styles?
You know, it's, I'll be honest, I have to get back with you on that one. It's a relatively new feature for me as well. It just came out. I don't know. We'll have to take that one offline, and I'll have to get back with that person.
Okay. How can I change the background of the scene if I want to bring a new background?
So again, there's by default inside of here, there are you know, these backgrounds. You can bring in some other pictures if you want. They're just kind of these panoramic views around. So there are ways that you can import other pictures in the background.
And last question, can landscape sculpt be used to just a rolling grass hills without the rock feature?
It depends. So when you're importing objects into Twinmotion, there is the landscape feature. So I imported the model as a geometry feature, but you could import any shape. If you have a surface, it doesn't matter if it came from, you know, 3ds Max or whatever. I can import it as a landscape feature. Once it's imported as a landscape feature, I can sculpt that, and it doesn't matter what that material is that it's imported as. You can start sculpting that as well. But it has to be imported as a landscape feature, not geometry. That gives me the ability to come in here and do what I did here. It gives me these sculpting tools, but it has to be a landscape import.
Okay, those were all the questions we have time for today. If we didn't get to your question, or we said we would follow up on via email, we will do that. This was being recorded, and we'll post it to our resource center, and we'll be sure to send you a copy. Thank you so much, Dean, for presenting today.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.